Shedeur Sanders makes perfect sense. It did then, it does now.
The New Orleans Saints select Kelvin Banks Jr. The Pittsburgh Steelers select Derek Harmon.
Thought it was the one place for Shedeur. I know he had a good meeting with Tomlin.
We all didn't expect this, of course.
I did not envision any scenario after rounds 2 and 3, him being available come Saturday morning.
I think it's disgusting. I don't understand what the heck's going on with this. Other quarterbacks being taken who aren't as good as Shedeur.
It's been a long weekend. We're going to take you off sport here, all right, brother?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Hey, listen, you got to come in, you got to work hard, you got to earn your job, earn your keep. And it doesn't matter where you're taking, it matters what you do from this point forward, all right? Talented. I spent a lot of time with you. Let's get ready to go to work and improve over past week.
Reality can hit hard sometimes. And for Shedeur Sanders, that harsh reality was felt as he waited to be drafted. But it's not the start of a journey that makes the man, it's the finish. And in order to appreciate this entire story as we see it develop before our very eyes, we have to go back to the beginning, where it all started with this man. That is his father, primetime Shedeur Sanders, the man who would later go down as the greatest cornerback of all time. And he knew it. He was so good that teams avoided throwing the ball his way altogether. An icon with the Atlanta Falcons, played baseball at the same time, the only player to play in both a Super Bowl and a World Series, won a Super Bowl with the 49ers and the Cowboys, will be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2011, as well as the College Football Hall of Fame that same year. Media personality, author, public figure, a head coach. But in the midst of all that, something bigger than sports would happen. He would become a father. Primetime had 5 kids, and that 4th child was named Shedeur Sanders. Born February 7, 2002. Shedeur grew up around football, of course, because of his father, but he wanted to be known for being more than just Deion's son. And in high school, he showed flashes that he potentially had what it took to make that happen. Enrolling in Trinity Christian in 2017, he would start all 4 years under his father, who was the offense coordinator for the school, throwing for over 12,000 yards with 160 touchdowns, leading them to back-to-back championships in 2018 and 2019, finishing his high school stint as a 3-star recruit by 24/7 Sport, mainly due to the fact that he played against lesser competition at the smaller Trinity Christian with just okay measurables, as he wasn't super athletic and neither did he have a cannon for an arm, but he still was seen as a solid QB, leading him to committing to FAU until his father dropped this news.
So Hall of Famer Shedeur Sanders has been named the head coach of Jackson State University Tigers.
First and foremost, God led me to Jackson State. That's what I can truly, honestly say.
So Shedeur Sanders flipped his commitment to Jackson State. His brother Shiloh would also join the team, an HBCU that went 4-8 the year before. And as hard as it is to make the NFL as a quarterback, making it to the NFL as a quarterback from an HBCU is almost unheard of, as only 13 quarterbacks from an HBCU have been selected in the NFL draft since the NFL and the AFL merger in 1970. And we know how the story at Jackson State ends, but I think Deion at the time was going to try and change that, as we would see Isaiah Bolden, a corner from Jackson State, drafted to the Patriots in 2023, who is still actively on the roster, which will make him and Carson Winston the only HBCU players drafted in the last 3 years. So at that time, Shedeur was going to have to ball out in order to make it. I'm talking about this man was going to have to absolutely dominate each and every single time he stepped on the field. And for the most part, that's exactly what he did. 3,231 passing yards, 30 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions in 2021. He followed that up with 3,752 yards and 40 touchdowns in 2022 with only 6 interceptions with the addition of Travis Hunter. But there was still a small issue. Many doubted whether or not Shedeur could do the same thing against D1 competition. And at that time, me and others were not sure if we were ever going to get that answer. That was until
Deion coach Prime Sanders will no longer be the coach of Jackson State.
And I like for y'all to hear it from me and not anyone else. I've chosen to accept the job elsewhere. Everything I said I would do, I did. Everything I said I wanted to happen, I tried my darnest to make it happen.
Colorado later officially named Sanders its next head coach.
It didn't matter if you hated Deion or you loved him. I think we all can agree. Coach Prime going to Boulder, Colorado became one of the biggest stories in college football, bringing eyes to the game that may not have considered it otherwise. New fans, more money, more exposure, the most hype a program has had in a very long time. There was only one thing missing for Colorado: the wins. And with the runner-ups to the national championship game being the first test for Shedeur and Coach Prime, the entire world was watching.
Reading out of the gun, Sanders looking, walking at 2 at the 7. Touchdown! Throwing it. Sanders! Sprinting. Touchdown! Touchdown! Takes a knee, and how about this?
In an absolutely crazy 45-42 win over TCU, who many at the time thought would at least be decent, Shedeur put up NCAA 25 video game-like numbers. 510 yards, 4 touchdowns, as the college football world began to believe.
Shedeur broke a single.
For real? Shedeur Sanders from a HBCU?
Absolutely.
The one that played at Jackson last year?
The one that played at Jackson State last
The
year.
one that you asked me, why would I give him the starting job? But like that, no, not you. I got receipts. I know who they are.
I never
Not you, baby. I just gotta say it.
I would never ask.
I would never do that.
No.
What's up, boss? You believe now? You hold on. Oh no. Do you believe that? Huh? Oh no. I read through that bull junk you wrote down. I read through that. I sifted through all that. Yeah. Oh no. Come on. Do you believe? You don't believe.
And the next 2 weeks would be no different, with Shedeur throwing for at least 300 yards in games against Nebraska and Colorado State.
The Cinderella story is over, man. Right? They're fighting for clicks, we're fighting for wins. There's a difference.
James, and they get more. Remember what he said to Katie George. We are not satisfied. We are not done. Katie turned to us. She said, is he taking this personal, all the hype around Colorado?
But reality was set in that Colorado simply did not have the horses to compete at a high level. Because as impressive as the 3-game winning streak was, Colorado would go on to lose every other game, besides a 27-24 win over Arizona State, in a season that could have easily ended differently if they had completed the comeback against USC, a 371-yard performance with 4 touchdowns before going down 41-48, allowing a 29-point comeback to Stanford in overtime in a game that lasted way too long. Not finishing off Arizona, the team was all offense and no defense, and by the last game of the season, Shedeur would have to sit out due to a fracture in his back after taking 52 sacks, which was the most sacks taken all year, due to him being behind a less than ideal offensive line, on top of him holding the ball way too long in an attempt to extend play. So after all the hype and the great start, Colorado would finish 4-6, which was a 3-game improvement, but definitely not what the Sanders had hoped for. So what would be their next move? Well, get to work. Year 2 for the Sanders would roll around, and with the expectations now being higher, anything short of a bowl game berth would be a failed season. And in the first game of the 2024 season, Shedeur would put on a show. 444 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception against North Dakota State. And I know what you're thinking, it's just North Dakota State. But let me tell you though, North Dakota State is legit, and currently the reigning FCS champion. No, it's not on the same level as many FBS schools, but given the chance, they can beat those schools. The Buffaloes, though, would drop their next game, with Shedeur having his worst game of the regular season, 244 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. That was his worst game of the season, but after that, Shedeur cooked each and every single week. A bounce back game against Colorado State, adding 310 yards with 4 touchdowns, 341 against Baylor, 388, albeit in a loss against Kansas State, 438 yards, 5 touchdowns against Oklahoma State, 340 in week 10 against Utah, helping Colorado reach its first bowl game since 2020, but the results will be the same as it was in 2020. The Buffs lost 14-36. Sanders had his second bad game stat-wise, with only 208 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, as BYU as a whole was just too much for the Buffaloes. And although this was not how Shedeur wanted the season to end, he did finish with 4,134 passing yards, 37 passing touchdowns, which was second in FBS, 8 interceptions on a 74% completion percentage, which was the best in FBS. Topping it off with the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award and Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year honors. But even though Shedeur was leaving college as one of the most accurate passers according to his percentage and his on target throws, the stigma of just being an okay athlete and having an okay arm was still hovering around him. Colorado had a great season, but they did drop a few key games. Even though it wasn't all Shedeur's fault, quarterbacks are still judged on that. On top of playing in the Pac-12 one year and then the Big 12 the next, smaller conferences that reignited the Shedeur playing at small schools narrative that he has been dealing with since high school. So looking at all of that, there were still question marks around him on whether or not it will be worth it for a team to take a chance on him. Questions that could be answered during the pre-draft process, as it would be Shedeur's chance to win teams over. However, according to most sources, the opposite happened.
Because I tracked it down, I knew who it was, and I called the head coach, and we had a candid conversation. He said, Prime, that never happened. He said, matter of fact, it was a great interview. We all walked out of there saying, dang, this kid got it.
As we got closer and closer to the draft, videos of Coach Prime making statements like this began to resurface.
Will you step in and do some of that if it's the wrong organization and say he ain't going there?
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it publicly. I'll do it privately.
You have said that if the right team does not pick him, that you will intervene.
That's my son. It's not like who I would like for him to play for. It's a couple teams that I won't allow him to play for. But I know where I want them to go. So there's certain cities that ain't gonna happen. It's gonna be a big man. It's gonna be it's gonna be an Eli.
And as we fast forward, his tune would change.
Honestly, Shedeur has told me, he's talked to me intently about all the visits he's had with all the teams, so I know where his heart is. I know where he wants to go. If it's New York, it's New York. If it's Tennessee, if it's Cleveland, if it's still the Raiders, if it's New Orleans, if it's any of those teams that are seeking a quarterback, I'm happy with it, man, because I know what he's going to do to the organization. I know what he's going to do.
But maybe the damage was already done. Shedeur also had a statement for any team that wanted to draft him.
If you ain't trying to change the franchise or the coach, don't give me. So you should know history repeats itself over and over and over. And I've done it over and over and over, so it should be no question why an NFL franchise should pick him.
But going number one did not really matter to him. He just wanted an opportunity to change an organization for the better.
If you don't go number one, are you the type that holds a grudge forever?
Why would I be mad? I think about it like this. These are good problems to have.
I completely agree.
You could be in a way worse situation, so being number one, that don't really matter to me at the end of the day.
And even though the NFL is obviously harder than college, he was able to help 2 college programs get better, and he felt he could do it again in the NFL. And many agreed with his feeling.
Can he stand up in the pocket? Can he throw? Can he make reads? We want him to do that. That's what he does. That is what he does. That's his strength. He has and walks with that type of confidence and has this type of game. This is what makes me a believer of him being the number one quarterback.
So as the pre-draft festivities continued, we fast forward to Shedeur's pro day, and some scouts were very critical of his performance.
Big convo around NFL players was Shedeur patting the ball. We better stop patting that ball. We break it on it. I promise he can pat the ball and be just fine.
The pat is more about just delaying the upper body so it just builds a little more torque and patting the ball overblown.
But in my opinion, all these things could be fixed, but the noise did not end right there, because rumblings of bad interviews began to surface and Shedeur's stock began to drop, going from a top 3 pick to number 9 to the Saints, and then falling all the way to Pittsburgh. Many, including myself, saw this as simply being a product of many teams not needing a quarterback at the moment. But then each potential landing spot for Shedeur Sanders began to fade away.
Mason Graham, Ashton Genty, Kelvin Banks Jr., Derek Harmon.
But initially, it wasn't that concerning. Maybe Cam Ward would be the only QB selected in the first day, leaving room for Shedeur Sanders to be the first QB on day 2. But the Giants saw this differently.
Houston Texans have traded the 25th pick to the New York Giants. The New York Giants select Jackson Dart,
leaving some stunned and others not so much.
In November of 2024, would I have thought Jackson Dart was going to be selected before Shedeur Sanders? I would have said no. But once you start to study those guys, what they did last year, if you asked me, and I said it in March, Matt, who had the better tape, Shedeur or Jackson Dart? I would have said Jackson Dart, like I did on March 3rd.
So after day 1 of the NFL draft, Sanders was still on the board.
We all didn't expect this, of course, but I feel like with God, anything possible. Tomorrow's the day. We're going to be happy regardless.
Tomorrow would indeed roll around, and we would see 3 more QBs taken, none of them being Shedeur. The Saints, the Seahawks, and Cleveland, leaving many scratching their heads as to what was happening. Because even though Shedeur may not have been seen as a top pick to some, many did believe at worst he was the 3rd best QB in the draft class. But 32 NFL teams did not see it that way, as Shedeur would have to wait another day, with reports continuing to come out on various reasons he may have fallen. So on top of dealing with the noise, he had to also deal with this.
But you're gonna have to wait a little bit longer, man.
In a similar fashion to Cooper DeJean last year, Tyler Warren, who went in the first round, and Isaiah Bond, who ultimately went undrafted. But soon enough, Shedeur would get the call he had been waiting for.
With the 144th pick, the Cleveland Browns select Shedeur Sanders.
After waiting through one more full round on day 3, Shedeur would finally be selected by the Browns. In an odd move considering the fact that they drafted QB Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round, adding Sanders to an odd but full QB room. But now we truly get to see what Shedeur is made of. Is Cleveland the ideal spot for a quarterback to go? Not really, but most teams in the NFL they need a QB aren't good, minus the Steelers. However, this is one place where he can compete for the starting job. And whether you believe that Shedeur simply wasn't good enough to be a day 1 or day 2 pick, or if you believe the league was trying to send a message, I think we all can agree on this. It's up to Shedeur now to prove one or two things, whether the teams that passed on him were right, or become that quarterback that teams will forever hate they passed on. And he will always be Coach Prime's son, but now it's time for him to write his own legacy.